Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. I'm your host, BJ Odom. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving that 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story you'd like to share? We would love to hear it and get it on the podcast. Just send all your comments and stories to giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, as we welcome you to episode 41. This week we introduce you to Donna Williamson, who learned in her early 20s she had kidney disease, but by the grace of God, she was completely cured for almost 20 years, till it raised its ugly head and forcing her into dialysis and kidney transplantation. 15 years later, Donna would need another kidney transplant. Many ups and downs, but she continues to beat the odds. We also hear about the work she's done with the Fletcher Fund, an organization helping others in need with transplant therapy and meds. To learn more about the Fletcher Fund or the kidney disease, just look in the show notes and find Donna's email address. And now as we get started, let's say hello, Donna, and tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, BJ. My name's Donna Williamson. I'm originally from Ohio, but I've lived all over the U.S. and have enjoyed it every minute of it. I have my PhD from Georgia State University, have a degree from Indiana University and Brescia University as well. I'm a retired college professor, director of business graduate programs, and I've had an exciting life. And it all started when I was 23 years old. I came home from work, and I've been healthy all my life. And I went to the bathroom, and suddenly everything crashed. I doubled up in pain. My urine was solid blood.
Oh, wow.
I went to the emergency room, and they said, "You've got a kidney stone." Except I didn't have a kidney stone. So they said, "Well, you must have passed it. But we're going to put you in the hospital, and we're going to see what's going on." So then they decided I had glomerulonephritis. But they kept me in the hospital for a week. I never had any more pain. Everything was fine. I went home. My life went back to normal. 3 months later, my husband and I went to visit our parents and crash. I was in the hospital. They said, "You're in total renal failure." My brother was ready to give me a kidney, but I was too ill to have a transplant. You know, you have to be pretty healthy to have a transplant, which is really kind of odd.
Yes.
Because you have to be pretty sick in order to have a transplant. So I was kind of in that in-between place. Nothing worked. I was vomiting. I had a high fever. I had a horrible migraine headache. Couldn't urinate. I was hooked up to everything. And it happened so suddenly again. Now, here's the part that a lot of your listeners will not believe. That I was raised in church. I gave my heart to Jesus when I was 9. And we had a lot of pastors. Most of them liked little kids. So I liked them. But we had this one I didn't like. He didn't like little kids either. He came in. He prayed for me. I had no faith in this man. 3 minutes later, I'm ringing the nurse. "I got to go to the bathroom." Her eyes are big as saucers. "Ma'am, you can't go to the bathroom." "I have to go to the bathroom." So she calls the doctor. Doctor says, "Let her try." They pull the catheter out. And she's thinking, I know, I got to put this right back in this girl. But I went to the bathroom and I said, I am starving. And her eyes are really big as saucers. She said, you think you can eat something? I said, I know I can eat something. Well, I'll call the doctor. So she calls the doctor. Doctor says, give her anything that's liquid. I ate Pop-Tart, or not Pop-Tarts, popsicles, Jell-O, chicken broth, whatever was liquid, I went through it, which meant I went to the bathroom a lot too, which surprised that nurse. The next morning, I was weak as a kitten, but I took a shower, threw on a little makeup. Doctor comes in. Oh, excuse me, ma'am. Goes back out. I thought, oh, that was really strange. I guess he must have gotten a call. He comes back a little while later, says, boy, you're looking really good today. I said, I'm feeling really good. He says, yeah, your numbers look much better. I said, can I go home? He says, well, we'll just see how you're feeling tomorrow. Next day, lo and behold, my numbers were still good, a little bit better. He says, okay, you can go home, but we're going to keep you around for about 3 months and make sure life is really good before you go back. Remember, we were visiting our parents and they were a couple of states away. So before I could go back, never had another problem. I was 23 at that time, never had another problem with my kidneys. That's why I was able to go ahead and continue working, go ahead and continue my education, working full time, going to school part time, playing on the tennis team, loving life. 46 rolls around. I start creeping into renal failure, getting short of breath. That was really a big deal. Could only take a few stair steps. Had to sit down and breathe. Very fatigued. At that point in my life, I owned a ladies' clothing store, a boutique with gifts and so forth. Made it into my store pretty seldom. It was a little rough, and it started getting rougher. And I was fortunate enough to be married to a guy who was my rock, and he was there whenever I needed him. And we had a second home. We were living in Utah at the time, and our second home was in Georgia. I had an only child, Lisa, and she lived in Georgia. And he was very, very healthy, and he was always outside doing stuff. And so he needed a hernia repair. And he promised me that when we went to Georgia that following winter, he would have his hernia repair. And so he did. And I was getting very close to needing a transplant. Well, some numbers were askew on his pre-op work. He was 46 years old. I was 47.
Now, is this your first transplant, or did you get one back when you were 23? Or did
no,
23, it kind of got better?
After that, and that's what I'm saying. I was healed. That's why I said, some of your viewers may not believe this, but that's what happened. Never had another problem with my kidneys. Went to see the doctors every 6 months or every year, but never had any medicine, nothing. They just wanted me to come back in for follow-ups because of that terrible situation I had when I was 23.
Wow.
But started going back into renal failure at 46. So I thought I was close to needing a transplant. And then we discover he is in the last stage of liver cancer. So he's in the last stage of liver cancer. I need a transplant, close to needing a transplant. Then I need to go on dialysis, but he dies. It was bad time. And as soon as Arthur died, I was started dialysis. Was on dialysis for 3 days, and I got my transplant. But I was in really bad shape. Did not start dialysis when I needed to.
Okay.
not recommended, but he was dying. And so I didn't want to start dialysis when he was dying, and then he died. And so I was in bad shape, and that moved me way up on the list because I was so bad. And I got my transplant in 3 days, and that was a deceased donor. And life was so good. I was in and out of the hospital so much prior to getting that transplant. The 2 months before my transplant, I was in and out of the hospital all the time. And dialysis helped. Don't ever turn down dialysis, and start when you need to start. But the transplant made all the difference in the world. And that lasted for 15 years. And then, almost exactly on the anniversary of 15 years, I had to go back on dialysis. And I was remarried by then. And my doctor said I was the perfect candidate for peritoneal. I was the right size. All of the features were correct. So I should try peritoneal, which I did.
And that's the one you do at home, correct?
Yes, they do laparoscopic surgery. And where they go in and they put the tubes inside your abdomen, and you connect, and you can do it at night while you're sleeping. It's a good concept. But unfortunately, it did not work for me. It got to the point that my husband and I were doing peritoneal over 18 hours a day. And I was still in the hospital about every less than 10 days because I had magnesium overload one time. I had potassium overload one time. My creatinine was through the roof one time. Peritoneal just did not work for me, no matter how long we did it. It just did not work for me. So I went back to hemodialysis. And then a lady in my church who was a snowbird came to me one Sunday and said, Donna, God put it on my heart to give you a kidney. And I know we're the same blood type, and I want to try to give you a kidney. But what your audience doesn't know, and what you don't know, BJ, is that when she told me this, she and I both were 65 years old. When you're 65 years old, statistics tells us you have less than a 2% chance of being healthy enough to donate a kidney.
Right.
So even though her husband and her family supported her in donating a kidney, which is crucial, and she wanted to do it, and she was the same blood type. And then after going through all the testing with the blood work, we were a close enough match. Still, she had to go through all this testing to see if physically she was healthy enough. So she went through it and she passed. So we were set up to do this in Fort Myers, Florida. 2 weeks prior to her giving me the kidney, they lost a donor on the table.
Oh, I remember all this, yes.
A son was donating a kidney to his father. His father survived. The son died. A horrific situation. So sad. So sad. We were both notified that this happened, which meant that the programs immediately shut down. UNOS shuts down your program when something like this happens. And I thought, oh my gosh, how sad. And oh, I've lost my donor. And I don't blame her. I would back out too. But she said, no, we've got to go wherever we can get in the quickest. And I thought, are you crazy? Why would you want to do this? What a self-sacrificing person. But they are out there.
It's amazing what some people do. And I had someone on the podcast here episodes back that said she just woke up in the middle of the night, wanted to donate a kidney, didn't know anybody who needed a kidney, didn't care who it was, what their nationality was, what their beliefs were. She was just bound and determined that she would donate a kidney, and she followed through. And she actually, without knowing anyone who needed a kidney, because a lot of people that listen to this program understand when you say a chain. So she started her own chain, and believe it or not, I think they ended up getting like 12 people on the chain that she ended up donating her kidney to.
Isn't that crazy?
And it was a woman across country. I think she had hers done at UCLA, and the lady that received it was like in Pittsburgh or somewhere. And, now they've met and they've become close friends. But man, talk about a funny situation.
I have a friend in Ohio. She was a teacher. She retired 8 years ago. She read an article in the newspaper, the Columbus Daily. She lives in Columbus, about a heartwarming story of someone donating a kidney. She just retired. She read it and she thought, well, I could do that. So she did. And she doesn't know who she donated to. She just called the hospital and said, I'd like to donate a kidney. And they did. They took it from there. And she's not having any kidney issues. And my donor's not having any kidney issues, so it works out fine.
And I do.
So for a few weeks, their numbers are a little off. And then the remaining kidney just kicks in, and then everything goes back to normal.
And I do want to mention real quick, going back, because I remember that episode in Fort Myers where they did lose the donor on the table, and that was an error in the surgery or something. And I just want to, really stress that it's like a once in a million that this is going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately it did, but I just wanted to make sure that we, pass that along, because somebody may hear that and go, oh my gosh, I was going to donate and I never will again, or never.
Oh yeah, no, that was a real shocker, because yes, that is a major rarity for anything like that to happen. And UNO shut them down immediately, and they do not have a kidney program there anymore. So you don't have to worry about it here either.
Okay, because I didn't know. I thought they started doing them again, but I guess not then. So it's still
they did
dormant.
Start, but it didn't last very long, and they just decided that they would just refer people to Tampa.
Okay, that's where I got all my transplants. So good hospital there in Tampa.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, we found another place, and we had our transplant at Indiana University, and she's from Illinois, and so it was a little closer. It was a lot closer for her as well, and that was June 18, 2015. So we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary on my second transplant. And that's from a living donor. And of course, with a living donor, the kidney should last a lot longer as well, because it hasn't had any trauma in its life. Like if someone's had a car wreck or something of that nature, then the kidney has had trauma, and the kidney has always been removed from the body. So there's some trauma. So most of the time, if you have a living donor, then that's usually to your advantage. So people out there, donate.
And then, of course, you say you're doing good with the kidney transplant, but now is it because of the because before we went on the air here, I'm still back in my old radio days, because we're not really on the air. This is a podcast heard by many, but But now you are telling me that you have some other complications going on. Is this from the transplant, or is it something totally, in
It's
another direction?
totally separate. It's totally separate from the transplant. My donor was concerned that she had perhaps given it to me, but I have a rare disease, light chain deposition disease. It's in the multiple myeloma family, and I have the chemotherapy for it when it rears its ugly head. I'm getting ready to start that for the fourth time. My nephrologist was concerned that it would impact my kidney because, chemotherapy is pretty heavy drug.
Yeah, pretty wicked stuff, yes.
But for most of you people out there know a little something about creatinine, and my creatinine is at a 1.0. That's after 10 years, and that's after a lot of heavy drugs. With this disease, I was first diagnosed 7 months after my second transplant. 7 months after my second transplant, I was struck with this, and I was diagnosed with 5 different diagnoses, and none of them were correct. And so the disease just got worse and worse and worse. I was in ICU. They did not expect me to live. I was back on dialysis 7 months after the transplant, back on dialysis. And I'm saying, you already know that I'm a Christian. So I'm saying, Lord, why would you let me go through all of that and let Susan give me this kidney if you were just going to take it away 7 months later? It just did not make good sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had dry gangrene all over my feet and creeping up my ankle. It was horrific pain. And you can actually read about me in the literature if you read anything about nephrology, because it's never happened before. There's nothing in the literature about anything of this nature. So they flew me back up to Indianapolis where I was transplanted, hoping to save my life. And sure enough, they were able to diagnose me, and they started the chemotherapy. And little by little, the dried gangrene started clearing up, and they took me off dialysis. And I said, I need dialysis. I'm still gaining fluid. I was 115 pounds, and I picked up 40 pounds of fluid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 40 pounds of fluid. I said, please give me some dialysis. And they said, no, we're not giving you dialysis because that makes the kidney think it doesn't have to do it anymore. It doesn't have to work. I grew up on a dairy farm. And when we would have a cow to get sick, the vet would come out, and sometimes it would receive injections. Now you can imagine the size of the vial of medication that the vet might put into a cow. A cow that might be 300 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets an injection, 350 pounds. It's going to be huge, right?
Yes.
And they were giving me a big vial like that of Lasix, trying to get this kidney to work. Now, I think maybe most of your listeners might know what Lasix is. It's what's it called, DJ? Another term for Lasix?
I just call it the drug that makes you pee a lot. See, I'm a pretty simpleton. I never was a professor like you.
Go to the bathroom and go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I never was a professor like you. I don't know those big words.
Well, anyway, that's what they would do, because they said, we have to make the kidney work. We can't just give you dialysis or you'll always be on dialysis. And lo and behold, eventually the kidney started working again. Little by little, the first day it worked, I had my oncologist, hematologist come and see me with her team. And that's all the students that were under her. So you think I'm a professor? This lady is a professor. And she's a little short Chinese lady, very smart. And she wears these very high heels to make her a little bit taller because she's like 4.5 foot tall, right? So she comes in and she says, "Oh, you peed today." And she's jumping up and down. And I start laughing. And she said, "Hey, it doesn't take much for us to get excited." She was just so happy that finally they were starting to make me well. I mean, I've been in the hospital a long time, and things were finally starting to work. And of course, I told my kidney surgeon that he was just excited because I didn't really screw his statistics up too badly. Because it doesn't look very good if you lose a transplant patient the first year.
Yeah. So, yeah, you did him good then.
Yeah, he had a very spotless record. And he's done more transplants than anyone else in the nation, by the way. Just a little plug for him. So, enough about me. Now let's talk about something more exciting. You want to talk a little bit about the Fletcher Fund, right?
Yes, because I know we have people all over the country that listen to this podcast, and this might be something that you can do, like if you have a support group or people around you with transplants, because I first learned about this actually when I was in Fort Myers, where I met you, and it's called the Fletcher Fund. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what the Fletcher Fund is and what it does?
Okay, I would love to. This is something I'm really, really proud of, and it's not me personally. It's our transplant group in Fort Myers. We have a group of volunteers, just like many of you have, and if you've gone through a kidney transplant, a heart transplant, a liver transplant, you know that you're off from work a lot. You're paying a lot of co-pays. You don't have a lot of money left. So one year when I was president of our support group, this was during our highlight years. So this was probably back around the early 2000s, somewhere in those early years, maybe 2004, 3, 2 maybe. So somewhere in that era. And we had, at least 80, I'd say about 80 members in our support group. We have about 15 members right now.
Oh, wow. So it's really shrunk. I guess I should have never left town. Did I do this? I hope I didn't do it.
You did it, BJ. We all came because we just loved hearing you talk, you know. I'm not sure what happened. I think a lot of what happened is that things got much better. We didn't need the support like we did then. Meds got a lot better. They got a lot easier to take. We had a lot better funding from Medicare. We didn't have to help each other out with our meds. I mean, this is a live podcast. I don't want to get in trouble with the feds, but, you know, there was a time or two you might share your meds a little bit because somebody couldn't afford them.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Remember Jeff couldn't always afford it. You'd reach that donut, and so you have to try to stretch the meds. And then there were things like now you can recover and get back to work better than you could then.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's not quite the need for support groups like there used to be. When we used to be that, it used to be that. I'm sorry, my husband's just checking to see if I'm still talking to you. I think he's wanting to know when can we go to dinner?
Oh, okay. Well,
I
we
don't do a
better
lot of cooking.
we better hurry through this then. There's a hungry man
No,
awaiting.
no, no, no. We're perfectly fine. But what was I saying? I don't know. We needed each other more than we do now. It seems for some reason. Oh, because there's so many people who have transplants now. Then there weren't so many people, and you needed to talk to people who have had them. What's it like when you have a transplant? I never known anyone to know what it's like to have a transplant. So you needed to come to support group meetings more than
Yeah,
today, I guess.
because I remember
So
when
anyhow,
I remember when I first found out that I was going to need a heart transplant back in I think it was 2002 maybe, because I got mine in March of 2003. So I think 2002 I actually learned that I was going to need one. And the first thing I did was reach out and met Mike Terry, who was another heart transplant patient, and had him on my
right?
radio show way back then. And then I joined the organization myself. And yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's more. I mean, it's not. I don't know. Maybe people are more aware, like you said, there are more transplants than ever before. So it's not an everyday occurrence, but you will meet someone with a transplant a lot quicker nowadays than you would have 20 years ago.
exactly, exactly. So about 35 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Fletcher started Organ Support Group of Southwest Florida. And Mac had a heart transplant. Great guy. And it started with about 5 people around his kitchen table. And it grew to the extent that it was at that point. And Mike Terry, the gentleman that BJ just mentioned, said he'd like to someday be able to help someone get a transplant. And I had just helped someone buy a bottle of medicine. And I said, yeah, that would be cool. So we decided that we were going to start a fund so that we could give out small grants to help people. The problem was we had no money. We had no wealthy people in our organization, and we needed a lot of donations in order to make this grow. So what could we possibly do? Well, one thing I did when I was a college professor, I traveled with the college kids a lot because I was a fraternity advisor for a business organization where we competed against other business organizations. And when we did well, we went across the nation competing, and we needed some travel money. So we would sell donuts, we would do car washes, we would do all sorts of things. So I suggested that we make up T-shirts, and we sell T-shirts. And we give away T-shirts. For the ones that brought in the most money, they won a T-shirt. So if you got one of these T-shirts, now you couldn't buy these T-shirts. You could only win these T-shirts. And you were going to write letters to people who you spend money with. You were going to give them to your hairdressers, your dry cleaners, to people that you know at the insurance companies. Wherever you spend money, you're going to give them these letters or mail them these letters. But person to person always works better. So we had competitions, and they got acknowledged at the meetings. I brought them up on stage. I made a big whoop-de-doo about them because it was really important to acknowledge this person went out and worked hard to raise money for the Fletcher Fund to help people in our organization, to help others. And so we started that way, and we raised some money, and it was really good. And then we had the bright idea that we were going to put on a major production, which required a lot of work. And we had what we referred to as Night for Life. And it included a nice dinner, a silent auction. We even had a live auction in those days. BJ, were you the auctioneer one time?
I think at least one time I was the auctioneer, and I know I performed at a couple of those functions also too.
Yeah.
Helped grab some entertainment.
Yeah. We had some entertainment, and we raised a lot of money, and we invested it. And we didn't raise it overnight, but we worked on it year after year after year. And we've helped a lot of people in our organization. Now, we haven't helped anyone yet with a transplant, but we have helped so many people with their medications, doctor visits, travel expenses, dental expenses, anything at all that might have to do with their transplant. If they're waiting for a transplant, on the list, after the list, if a caregiver has to go with them, travel expenses. Our grants now are up to $5,000 per year. And this is for members within Southwest Florida, if you are a member of our group. And, it costs you $10 a year to join, so it's really expensive. And it also provides you pizza every week for lunch, or not every week, once a month.
We have our meetings.
And we have somewhere right around $250,000 still. $250,000. Now, we started this, 20 some years ago, but there was vision, and there were a bunch of ragtag muffins, you could say, trying to raise this money. And it all started with asking people who you do business with to help us, and to help others.
And like I said, if people are in other areas of the country besides Southwest Florida, where you and I happen to come from, this would be something amazing to start in your club if you have a support group or something, or maybe some people with the hospital. So it was an amazing thing that over the years that everyone who pitched in. I mean, I was with the organization. I was on the board for a while. So, yeah.
I would love to see this just take root and just grow all over the nation, because you never know when you might need a little assistance.
That's for sure.
You have a bad year and you need a little assistance, a lot of big medical expenses and not a lot of income. And you need a little assistance. And, it's all confidential. It's not like everybody's going to find out about it. So it's a very, very good thing. And support groups are a very good thing, too. You can ask questions. Have you ever felt this way on this medication?
Now, of course, now that I live in Central Florida, I know there's an Orlando, support group for transplant patients. There's also, Tampa has NOTE, N-O-T-E. I forget what that stands for, but they're in the Tampa Bay area. And like I said,
they also have a regular support group now too, BJ.
Oh, okay. Now,
besides NOTE.
And I could ask you this, and you may know the answer, since you were also transplanted at IU. Now, do they have a support group there? Because a lot of times, if you are getting a transplant or you have a transplant, you can usually talk to your coordinator. Because a lot of times where the hospitals are, somewhere around that area, there's usually a support group, and hopefully they can steer you in the right direction if wherever your point is.
I'm not sure if IU does, but you can always call IU Transplant Center and find out. I do know that Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I got my first transplant, has a wonderful support group.
So yeah, they're out there. Just you need to seek them out, and that would be that's kind of what we try to do with this podcast. To let people know what's going on in the transplant world, but also like to reach out to the hospital you may be attending or whatever can usually get you in the right direction. Well, I know your husband is getting hungry, but before
it wasn't that. I think he just wanted to see if I was doing the podcast.
Yeah, to make sure you're okay. I know how those caregivers are. If they're not in the eyesight for a half hour or so, I better make sure they're okay. But what I was going to say before we do let you go, is there anything else you'd like to talk about or, get out there? Because this is an open forum. I always say, this is when I have someone on the show, it's your story. It's your show. So before we let you go, anything else that you want people to be aware of in the world of transplants?
Well, if you happen to live anywhere around Southwest Florida and would like to attend one of our support group meetings, please contact BJ and he will give you my information so that you can reach out to me.
Now, always
I would be happy to talk with you. Or if you are on the list for a kidney transplant and you would like to speak with someone about what it's like, or you have questions that you would like to ask me, again, BJ can give you my number. I'm always happy to speak with anyone who has concerns about it.
And if you don't mind, usually, when we put these podcasts up, we have what you call show notes, which kind of explains a little bit about what the show is about. I've had a couple of people with transplants with books that they've written, and I've had, some other people with things going on in the world of transplants. And so we put that information up in the show notes. And so maybe if with your permission, I'll put your email address or something up in the show notes.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll do that then.
That's perfectly fine. Or if you happen to have light chain deposition disease, feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, I'm going to wish you the very best of luck in the future. And I'm sorry to hear you're, continuing to fight this with the blood cancer thing and you're needing chemo every now and again. But we're, as always, just glad to know you're out there walking around. You have a transplant. And as all of us transplant patients, we're always kind of out there saying how important, donations are.
It is truly the gift of life. And God bless all of those donors and donor families and keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much, Donna, for sharing your story with us all today on The Gift of Life. And be sure to join us again next week for another episode. If you have a transplant story, email us giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook. Also, don't forget to like and share this episode, and we would appreciate your 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Another podcast you might enjoy with myself and my old radio partner for years, BJ and Bill, the podcast. All on the Podcast Playground Network with some mighty fine podcasters. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate and enjoy each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.